Lesson 11. Images of translation in the dream state. Why is death one of the most avoided subjects? The Minneapolis Star Tribune's questions to children and young adults showed that they had answers around the issue of translating into the afterlife. Harold Klemp can't attribute to Christianity some stuff, but that doesn't mean that those ideas were outside their church, and the churches lacked the ability to convince or stick to a story. Haven't you noticed how Harold Klemp, Darwin Gross, and Paul Twitchell offered contradictory stories? Not all spiritual answers have to come in language that is exclusive to spirituality either. Harold Klemp seems to not distinguish much between the 2 or 3 age groups represented, nor does he seem to realize puberty with normal brain development means a person is finally capable of having independent morality and being responsible to make choices according to it, as far as their physical beings are concerned, of course, because you obviously don't have choices beyond your physical capabilities. Regardless of what family and society teach, that is the case. And if you say that somebody's going to turn against the wrong of a society, well, one of the things that you're going to run into is that they are going to tend not to be the pre-adolescents. They're going to tend not to be the people in their 30s and so on. It's going to be the adolescents, particularly onset of puberty to 25. Well, I guess a little bit after that, that are going to be the ones that say, then one may either develop the ideas or take the traditions as is or reject them. Learning about life and death can happen through dreams, but I have yet to think my dream and vision experiences that relate to Eckankar can actually constitute dream teachings, as in coming from Eckankar only sources. The way people act in unseen realms that their so-called dream master knows nothing about, beyond what they tell their Mahanta or Waishar, people initiate reports and stuff like that, is a diagnosed paranoid and disorganized schizophrenic the one to consider our guide to what is reality and the master of our inner and outer worlds? A soul at its peak of spiritual readiness is supposed to have become an adept of the Vairagi order, which is alleged to be far more numerous than the 970 mythical Eckmasters that are said to have formed the golden cord of living Eckmasters. This is probably how most Eckists would interpret having any one of my spiritual names of X, Y, B, especially Bo Chakelm, a person who contemplates death and life, has a greater understanding of it. Those with psychic and spiritual experiences are bound to approach death with the memory that they have memories, that one has gone through some of these out-of-body experiences before. My spiritual journey has been long and hard, but whose hasn't? All God awareness is the state of being aware that there is God. Among that is the secret knowledge beyond the attached view of the material human. I call this Yad Namad, or undefiled knowledge, and give it a black sigillium with a shepherd's staff, crooked back, much like a backslash, but above, like / backslash with 3 in the middle, like, and then, a row. So with 3 lines in the middle joined at the top, like a 5-pillar building, would it be better to rely on a Mahanta or greater person to show up in the radiant form to guide the Ekkas past the lords of karma? Or rely on your continued practice of the presence of God and upholding the big picture of undefiled knowledge? Now, my channel graphic here, you'll see the black undefiled knowledge and the absolute righteousness is the other. But confusion about heaven doesn't stop in Eckankar. It seems that it usually increases among those who believe in it, rather than just use it as a metaphysical, psychological study class. People want to know what faith describes it best, and they all claim to. Harold Klemp said he was involved in 2 initiatic orders in his initial days as an Eckankar member. The Golden Dawn teaching certainly comes out in this discourse. What is the other one he was hinting at in Journey of the Soul? Mahanta Transcripts, Book 1. I agree that metaphysical claims of the physical and the astral should be grouped together as are life and the afterlife, and the broader mental plane are the causal plane, mental plane, and etheric plane. The talk of greater and lesser gateways makes the Eckankar concepts of heaven seem more like states of mind or projections upon the gullible beliefs of mankind that are made up, as Harold Klemp, Paul Twitchell, and maybe Darwin Gross went along. Don't the talks make it seem this way for the first and third, that all outside Eckankar can agree existed and were called living Eckmaster by those in Eckankar? The different ideas about heaven are explained as a result of systematic distribution of ECK, or Eckankar in the different cultures and times. Wouldn't it be better to say that some spiritual laws were only for a time and place, while what remains from prophets before an international message was preserved ended up being corrupted? Rivers and tributaries of Ek current are said to make their way down to the material world to sustain it. I do believe there is no ultimate separation between the lower worlds and a spiritual presence that includes more than God. There might be a hint here when referring to the 2-way communication into cables and there being a dominant Ek channel as their belief that a person is accountable and communicates with their leader rather than following what is actually a direct path to God. That belief also implies there are those who get through independent of whoever are considered Eckmasters, particularly the leader of Eckankar, that is called a living Eckmaster or Godman. Eckankar teaches of a specific plan of connecting a formative world on the astral plane through their main channels to Australia, the United States of America, Russia, the rest of Europe, India, Asia, Anatolia, Africa, the Americas as a whole, and every other region of Earth. Then they are supposed to be conduits to the regions. Then there are supposed to be conduits to the regions within it, down the little villages. This is supposed to give everyone their spiritual energy. In the medieval period, there was a belief about parts of the earth, and I find the 92 governor names of Yod and the 92 parts of the earth in the Enochian system. Number 66 has 2 options. Could be a better way to understand this rather than a generic astral double theory. Beliefs about death and heaven vary per culture, but is the afterlife merely a crystallization of what you believe here? Harold Klemp would have people believe that heavens change ahead of the times, and fit the wish fulfillment according to the period of history and religion a person found themselves in. Must sin be mean-spirited? For a person to earn less than they convince themselves that they would? Islam would teach that we awake to the reality of what we repressed in life, and God rewards beyond what the mind can imagine. It would agree that a soul translates into what perfectly fits its state of consciousness. Eckankar teaches that the first four heavens are in accord with that sort of cosmology, and that a person gets the plane or heaven corresponding with the number of their corporate initiation. They would have you believe that Vairagi, adept, knows their future life, and Paul Twitchell and Darwin Gross made prophecies that were proven wrong by their not surviving. The passage of time past that date, or some other way that proved that they were a false prophet according to what might be called orthodox or correctly believing religion, are the idea of such as that they would have now knowledge of the future. How then, that you could rely on more than other people. How then can anyone in their right mind believe that they were a co-worker with God and the other end of the scale when compared with ordinary people? Someone new to Eckankar grew up wondering why her parents feared death, because they didn't want to see, they didn't want her to see the dead body her grandmother lived in at her wake when she was 4. Children might learn about the translation called death and about the other worlds called heavens in dreams, but I'd say otherwise too. I have seen kids trace lines of light or follow something else I sense during or around the time of specific devotional services rendered unto God. A 10-year-old Eckist realized she was still alive after another girl her age asked if she was alive. Then they continued her dream of flying in a starry sky towards a planet outside our solar system. When I was little, it was Pink Planet, and it had wonders and enjoyment too. The second girl brought her to a place where they sung and danced upon patterns of rope that changed as they stepped through them, as they were stepping through them. As they were stepping through them. That is what they sang about. Upon hearing of the dream, the mother thought it was just symbolic. Harold Klemp told the girl that it was proof of life beyond, instead of just symbolic of weaving the circle of life and bypassing illusion. Waking dreams are a strange concept in Eckankar. Waking life is given interpretation as if it was a dream, or that it has a special message beyond the ordinary occurrence that others won't notice, are the golden-tongued wisdom. A third Eck initiate read about Hestia, or Vesta, and trembled in fear, thinking that she was one of the 6 Vestal virgins at some point, till she was shut in a tomb for choosing to be sexually defiled and died. She thought, as Eckankar programs its members to explain their problems based on past lives, that explained her social isolation and fear of enclosed spaces. The human has a space around it like a cube with dimensions that are twice that of its height. Any smaller space lived in will cause physical and psychological problems to some degree. Have associations like this ever been the beginning of spiritual healing, or have they been the cause of dissociation with reality? Wouldn't it be better for people to explain their habits based in encounters in life and natural systems? A 6th Eck initiate was friends with a Jewish woman and visited her right before she slipped into her final coma. What does it mean that she gave Eck love with all those relatives of the woman there? The dead Jewess's daughter thought her mother was present at the funeral and was told that hauntings are just how some people say goodbye. The Eckist later saw an astral double of her friend in a dream, telling how she didn't want to leave her husband and daughter. After fulfilling the request of the spectral entity to talk to the daughter and husband of the deceased, it seemed pleased upon its latter appearance to the sixth Ect initiate. This usually takes 22 years or so of membership in Eckankar. Dream travel and soul travel are the ways Eckankar teaches that people experience heaven in this lifetime. But is this closer to spiritual knowledge than belief and faith in the unadulterated messages of God's prophets? And I'm not saying every claim to scripture is such, Even long-time Eckists may never recall the sort of dreams and visions that Eckankar is supposed to teach a person to be able to have. Page 266 of the Eck Dream 2 Discourses by Harold Klemp wants you to believe that the current leader of Eckankar will meet them at death and make their translation enjoyable. To support this belief, the actions of Eckist are seen as them being vehicles for the Mahanta or exalted personality. The aforementioned sixth Eck initiate was the nurse for another Eckankar member that kept her terminal illness secret for 10 years. But now it was time for her to die. All the patient could do was blink to answer. Harold Klemp has a different definition of the unconscious. If the patient could answer this way and respond to touch, the nurse read her chapter 25 of Paul Twitchell's Stranger by the River and sang her Hugh. Divine It is pronounced as H-U-E. I have rewrote chapters other than death to talk about my experiences with and addresses to the Princess of Cups. I plan to rewrite death as her eulogy if the time comes. The nurse asked if there's anything she could do to help with her passing over and told her that she thought the spiritual leader of Eckankar was present before leaving to let other hospital workers take over. Asleep at home, she saw the glowing specter of the women who are now dead. The woman who was now dead, declaring she was ready. Is this an example of how the golden cords of love went over death and allowing the master into the individual's world? Or is it formulating assumptions that their Eckankar beliefs were true and the simple truth that the woman was in critical condition? Huge.